So one of the things I like about this clip is that as she starts to have the conversation, she says, now I might cry. It's not because I am sad. It's because I have to have this conversation with you, right? Most of us don't have the presence of mind to say that until, we're already in this. And it's like, I'm not sad. I'm expressing my anger by crying. It's a really common response that more commonly females have than males have. And it may have something to do with socialization, that females have been taught to be people pleasers and to, not necessarily stand up for themselves in a confident, assertive way. And so when they try to do it, it's emotionally overwhelming. And so that's how they end up crying. Some people think that when females cry in this kind of context, that it's a manipulation, that they're crying on purpose so that the other person can't respond in an assertive way. They'll have to comfort the crier rather than responding with, a no or whatever. But I think that is I think that's a little bit misogynistic to say that. There's a different style, and it's something that a lot of women suffer with, this, I want to be assertive. I want to stand up for myself. I want to say what needs to be said, but I end up crying. And I don't want to. And so I might even avoid the whole situation and then end up not standing up for myself. So it's a really common thing. The good news, if you're female and you know what I'm talking about and you're like, how is this ever going to end? With practice, you do get better. So the more you put yourself into situations where you're going to be assertive, it's more common when you're talking to somebody who it really matters. Like you have to talk to your boss about something, or you have a really good friend that you have to talk to them about something you really want to express to them, how much it hurt your feelings that they did something. And then you start crying and you're like, I'm not trying to cry. And I'm just trying to let you know how I'm feeling. And so it gets easier. The more you practice it, it does get easier. That's going to be my last tip. Okay. So, whoops, it's starting the video. Sorry. All right. So some of the consequences of anger. If you can give controlled assertions of your feelings, it typically will resolve conflicts. If you can extend forgiveness, it may actually make you feel less angry. So, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to have these feelings, obviously. And I mean, denying anger is way worse for us than if we acknowledge how we're feeling and we think about a good, controlled, logical way to express to the other person, the impact of their behavior on us, like that. Sometimes bringing it to the other person's attention, it's news to them. They didn't mean to do any of it. They were just being, oblivious. So being able to go through the process oftentimes reduces anger, right? But it's really hard. One of the benefits of anger is that it communicates strength and competence. Right? When other people see an angry person, that angry person seems to be single-minded. They seem to be completely aware of what their own goals are. They seem to be able to achieve those goals. And so it's certainly adaptive, and it certainly plays a strong role in a lot of interpersonal settings. There are a lot of situations where anger makes sense. Anger is another thing, another component of grief also. Like a lot of times when we've had a loss, it's hard to feel just purely sad because we have this mixed component where we're kind of mad at the person or the dog or whoever we've lost. We're kind of like, why did you run in front of the car? That I had a dog that got hit by a car, and it's like, why didn't you listen when I called you? And how did you get your head out of the collar? But you can't be mad at your dog. The dog doesn't know, right? And so you're like conflicted. But if you can actually use that anger productively and say, okay, and I did. I mean, I got, for the next dog that I had, that was not the kind of collar they had. Right? And there was no, you get out of the car and then I put the leash on you anymore. Right? So it benefited me. And I expressed, I was able to be purely sad that I lost my dog that way. Once I was willing to acknowledge the parts that I was angry about were really about me. Like I had not taken good care of the dog. I had the wrong kind of collar on her. I had, I had let her out of the car. I was holding onto her collar and clicked it in. And that gave her time to be like looking around at stuff that I didn't see. It turned out there was a cat. And once you recognize what you're actually angry at, in that case, I was angry at myself, then I could grieve the dog, right? My poor dog, I still miss that dog. Now, it's been long enough that I wouldn't have the dog now anyway, no matter what. But, sweet dog, good dog. I should have taken better care. So, how to express our anger? Well, there are people who think that the best way to deal with anger is to just sort of ignore it, right? We call this a passive approach. It's really an emotionally dishonest approach to their feelings. They don't think that they're entitled to have their feelings heard. And they oftentimes will use indirect messaging to try and maybe let the other person know that their feelings are hurt, but they won't come right out ever to say it because they're too inhibited about it. They do a lot of self-blame. They might be apologetic about the fact that they might be upset. So that's probably not a healthy approach. There's the passive aggressive. Still emotionally dishonest, still indirect. They might be self-denying at first, but then they start to go, you know what? I do deserve better. And you're just selfish. And so they'll start to do things to make sure that their needs are being met and removing choice from the other person, right? Like a passive aggressive person is going to like make sure that the other person gets punished in some way, doesn't get a say in what's happening because, I made sure that you don't get to have your goals met. We're going to be doing mine. That's absolutely not a healthy way to live life, to be it's very manipulative. Then there's just straight out aggressive, right? Where you have a person who's inappropriately honest. Do you really need a person who is feeling completely fine about telling everyone who hasn't even asked how they look in that outfit, or whether their hair looks good today or not, or, any other, kind of attack? Who needs this, right? When under pressure, they blame other people. They are very controlling. People who are aggressive are usually using this to try and control everybody else and control the situation and control the messaging, right? Like when there's a failure, it's definitely your fault. It's not mine. I try and control everything about the situation. And all of this is about self-enhancement so that I look good. So I attack you so that I look better next to you. There's an old saying where when someone else's flame is burning brighter than yours, you can either attempt to fan your own flame and get brighter, or you can try and snuff out their flame. And so a person who's aggressive, they're trying to snuff out the other person's flame all the time. They're always trying to make them smaller so that their self looks better. They think other people are going to look at them better. And so they get their needs met all the time, and nobody else's needs ever need to be met. The goal of anger, like the adaptive goal of anger, should be assertiveness, right? Where you are appropriately honest when needed. That you are direct about what you want. Speaking specifically about your needs. It's self-enhancing. Everybody should be self-enhancing, honestly. Everybody deserves to have their goals met. Everybody deserves to have their perspectives heard. People who are assertive are expressive and self-confident, but they're empathetic to the emotions of everybody there. It's not my emotions matter and you guys are just here to fill my, scene. We all have emotions, we all have needs, we all have goals, and all of us are equally valid. I'm going to make an argument for mine, right? That's what an assertive approach would be. Now, for a person who takes a passive approach, assertiveness might look aggressive to them because they're not really willing or comfortable with any degree of directness, any degree of honesty. I mean, for a person who's passive by itself or passive aggressive, they may feel like an assertive person behaving in an assertive way is domineering. It's really important to separate aggressive from assertive. It's really super important. On average, males are more comfortable being assertive than females are. On average, males are more likely to ask for what they want, to speak directly to what they want. Females are much more likely to give hints about what they want. This kind of indirect, kind of a little bit of a hint about what needs to be done. And then when it doesn't get done, they're just disappointed. Whereas males are much more likely to say what they need. So historically, assertiveness training has been focused on females. On average, females are more likely to need assertiveness training. But what we're starting to see is that, especially, in the last probably 5 years, we're seeing more males seeking out assertiveness training than used to be. So we're seeing, where it used to be 90% females in assertiveness training classes, it's gotten down to like 75% females in assertiveness training. We all need to learn how to speak directly about the things that need to be said in our own favor, because really, honestly, who else is going to speak up for us, right? Especially when you're looking at like an employment situation or something like a relationship situation. If you aren't willing to speak up for your own best interests, who are you expecting to do it for you? And so assertiveness training is really, actually really helpful. One of the best things that you would learn in assertiveness training, and I almost divulged that I learned in assertiveness training, is that it's not aggressiveness to be assertive. See the difference between the characteristics of the aggressive person and the characteristics of the assertive person, right? You are appropriately honest, not inappropriately. You're still direct. You're self-enhancing and expressive in both categories. But in the aggressive category, you're self-enhancing at the expense of others. Like you just go ahead and steamroller over everybody else. Assertive people want their own needs to be met. And I realize that we both have needs, but I want mine met. Like I'm not going to roll over and let you have whatever you want at my own expense, right? There's self-confidence in assertiveness. And that's part of what needs to be taught in assertiveness training for some people, is how to be confident. That they do deserve their needs to be met. And then I think part of assertiveness training that can be really helpful for anybody is to learn the difference between having my needs met at others' expense and having my needs met taking into consideration everybody else's needs. Like that's the tricky part, I think. And a lot of people they can't figure out how in the world that would ever even happen. Like, isn't it always a zero-sum game? If I'm getting my needs met, aren't you by definition not going to get yours? And that's not how the world works. It's not a zero-sum game. We can all get at least part. It might be a cooperation, right? Where I give up something, you give up something, and we're both getting part of our needs met, and neither of us are completely happy. But the point is, one of us is not the doormat, and the other one of us is not the person standing on it, right? And that's the important thing that assertiveness training can really teach. So hopefully I really made a good case for assertiveness training. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and we'll talk about cultural differences in the next section.